Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, everyone, for coming to this talk introduction. And thank you for all the people who are connected online. And I appreciate that very much. If you guys allow me, I may have people connecting from Ecuador who are Spanish speakers, and I'm going to say something in Spanish for them. Si ustedes están conectados y tienen preguntas, al final pueden hacerlas en español y yo me encargaré pues, de hacer la traducción a la audiencia de habla inglesa. Now, as Andrea said, I've been here for more than the last spring when Maria left. So I'm an associated research scientist based now here in Ona, but traveling between Gainesville and Ona. And I've been doing since I started collaborating with Maria and the LTAR, ethical variance and many other things. But I'm gonna talk to you today about specifically this carbon exchange, carbon dioxide exchange in pasture-based beef cattle production systems in Florida. And Maria, who is online and been really the core person for this, because when I came here, she was already doing this type of measurements, and we started collaboration, and we've been developing this, and she's still on this. So carbon exchange in pasture-based beef cattle production systems in Florida. So to put you in the context, we know that the core of the cow-calf production systems in Florida, the 80% of it, it's located in the south central of the state, 80% of it. And it provides a lot of societal and environmental services. And we can start going with those like beef production, biodiversity, environmental services, soil health, carbon sequestration, and many more. For example, Florida is in the top of the states in calf production with a revenue that is, as today, I think is greater than $1.7 billion. That is a lot. However, provision of those services relies on ecosystem productivity. If we don't have productivity, those other services go away. So this ecosystem productivity that I'm going to be talking is the foundation service for many, many other ecosystem services. In producers in this effort to increase productivity, forage production, and quality to livestock, they intensify the grazing land management. And however, these come with a lot of challenges, low fertility, soils with low fertility, therefore low productivity. They face seasonal and interannual climatic variability. In Florida, we are very familiar with that. And on top of that, all the economic uncertainties that are hanging around all the time. But these comes with trade-off, change in soil nutrient levels, water yield and quality, change in biodiversity, revenues, sustainability. And we have examples here, like proper management of those areas that lead to increase in soil organic carbon, soil fertility, improved soil health, and of course, productivity. But on the other side, if management is not done in the right way, that leads to soil degradation, low productivity, ecosystem decay, they go to deterioration, loss of services. That is published in a review by Silveira that we all work on that. And I have to say that in that pursuit of increasing productivity, natural areas are replaced by different type of ecosystems or introduce improved pasture that are mixed with native species and go from fertilized and fertilized pasture sites, silvopasture, and the end of that is the bahia grass or the improved pasture that is with high stocking rate and fertilized every single year. Well, however, the information that can be helpful to manage those ecosystems, which is net ecosystem productivity, and I want to emphasize that concept, net ecosystem productivity, different from primary productivity. Across these gradients and with all the trade-off, it's not much information about it out there. So, and that is something that we are doing, and I will be showing you a result for that. So how can this information help producers and many people? Well, we can come up with those, what's the benefits that can be obtained from knowing productivity across this way. We can weigh the cost benefits from doing that, improve life quality, soil health, water yield, and quality. So there is a huge demand for water to develop biodiversity, and we can rank those, but it's difficult to rank them. At the end, we can talk about the preservation of services, and at the very end, sustainability of those systems, which is what we want to get to do. Through the LTAP, Archibald, and US side, we seek to understand the ecosystem services provided by grazing lands across the area of management intensity. And we look at net ecosystem productivity as the basic service, as I mentioned, the foundational service. And if we have a good productivity, we can provide all the other services. Here inside Ona, we have the native rangeland. We can talk a lot about the native rangeland and past presentation by Maria, Betsy, and I think Brent as well. We have a lot of information of what you're doing in the LFA with those sites, and I don't have the time to go back to those again. So we have the native rangeland, we have the improved pasture, and we have a silvopasture site that we established close to 2 years ago. And inside Archibald, we have these other ecosystems. Sorry now that Betsy is connected, but I'm not gonna talk about those because we don't have enough time today. But we have other ecosystems within that range between the rangeland and the improved pasture. So we keep talking about net ecosystem productivity. You guys, what is that? So what's the difference with primary productivity? Well, it's the net ecosystem productivity, and it's the result of two large fluxes. Gross primary productivity, which is pretty much ecosystem photosynthesis and ecosystem respiration. And we can look at this cartoon on the right side, and I have here the gross primary productivity, and let's explain this in this way. So through photosynthesis, the ecosystem takes carbon dioxide and accumulates it into biomass in the ecosystem. That biomass is whatever we can think of, crops, leaves for grasses, anything. Forestry, so we know the products of forestry. So that carbon dioxide is taken out and converted into biomass. Part of it is used for ecosystem maintenance, which is ecosystem respiration. So that respiration is composed of different parts: soil, root respiration, plant respiration, you name it. All of that together form the ecosystem respiration. So which is part of that CO2 that is taken up through photosynthesis is used and is released back to the atmosphere. Now, if we CO2 are taken up and it goes through the ecosystem and one is released, two are left inside the ecosystem. That is net ecosystem. So if that GDP is greater than ecosystem respiration, we say the ecosystem is a carbon sink. and we can see that the ecosystem is growing, right? The other way around, it happens too, can happen on the yearly and monthly value, is the ecosystem is a carbon source. Carbon dioxide is released, more carbon dioxide is released to the atmosphere than what is taken out. So, and we are in trouble in that situation. I hope this is clear. So now, how do we measure that net ecosystem volume? So already you have seen the towers that we have around, and if you drive through and you will asking yourself, what is that? What is that doing? That's fine. And eddy covariance is a micrometeorological approach where we measure that net ecosystem volume. And we have carbon dioxide sensors, methane sensors, see that here. And we have an arrangement of different sensors, different radiation components, relative humidity, air temperature, wind speed. We have a camera to follow the seasonal change in the ecosystem. So we can see the greenness in the ecosystem. That here is a camera that we call phenocam. And we have inside Ona, we have 3 sites, plus a lot of sensors in the ground. We have soil temperature sensors at different depth, different places. We have soil moisture, different depth, different places, distance to the water table, and others that I don't remember now. But we have 3 sites here inside Ona. One, on the native side, we rent land, we start this system, and Maria started this system back in 2016. So by the end of this year, we will have 10 years of information from this side. It goes through a 4-year 5 cycle, a low stocking rate, never fertilized, and we have, like I said, the eddy covariance in January 2016. Let me jump to this end, which is the other end of the management. Bahia grass, that site was replaced about 30 years ago. If you guys, if any of you were here at that time, can say that. The native rangeland was replaced by this introduced improved pasture. It is raised at a higher stocking rate. It's fertilized every year at that rate that is in there. And after we had some collaborations and things going and working on publishing the first paper, Maria found the resources to set up this new tower. And it's been running there since 2021, so almost 5 years with this site. And the silvopasture. This silvopasture, the eddy covariance tower was established about a year ago, right? By mid-December, early December. This site, Florida's last pine was planted in January 2024. This site is not fertilized as often as the papaya grass every 2 or every 3 years, and I think there is no plan to fertilize it in the near future. Grazing was suspended, which is really great because we're measuring methane, carbon dioxide exchange, and evapotranspiration, which we also measure in there. So there is a component in the water balance as well. And eddy covariance, like I said, we started the tower back in December last year, early December, and we don't have a year of information yet on that side. To place you in the context, let me mention this. This is the how these systems are exposed to strong climatic fluctuation. This is just the Climate Drought Severity Index. I know many people don't like it, but I like it because it helps me to explain a lot of things in ecosystem functioning. So it's a drought index. The scale, -2 means moderate drought index, -3 severe, -4 extreme. So I put here the last 30 years, but I have the information, but it's too crowded for the last 100 years. And I'm telling you that in the last 25 years, last 30 years, the frequency of multi-year drought is increased by a lot. So in this point, the thing that I want to show you and emphasize the most is not that the system is reaching these very extreme values, is the time that it is exposed to drought. And under these times, sometimes the pressure sensor for the water table that is at 3 meters depth is flattened down. So the water table is below the 3 meters. So look at this, 3 years. Another strong drought here, not that many years after the first. Some drought spells, but look at this. In the last 5 years, what is happening with this area. So very extreme drought. We remember that before Hurricane Ian came, but it probably was for like 2-3 months, and the drought came back. This is the drought situation since we started the ecovariance study here since 2016. Look at this number of month under drought conditions. Ian, drought, and this year is not that much better, right? Also in the context, this is a paper that published Maria with a student about how management is affecting and the right management affect soil organic carbon and the nitrogen content of the soil. So you can see that the difference between the native French land and the silvo pasture down to 1. And also with nitrogen. But in addition to higher carbon content, higher nitrogen content as well, which provides organic carbon with a higher quality. And we can see here the total ecosystem carbon. You can see that the silvo pasture and highest carbon content because the trees in there, and you can see the soil organic carbon in those soils. Just to put you in the context of what is happening now and what it's been done after the replacement of the native ecosystem. Back in 2021, we published the first 4 years of information from the native French land. I remember being here and representing information from this side, but I'm gonna show you, so these, the first 4 years from the paper that we published and new information that we have now in 2023. We haven't been able to finish 24. It takes a little time and effort to process that, and we haven't finished them. But there is a lot of information here. You can see that decrease in net ecosystem productivity across the years as drought is being affecting this side. So 2019, the first fire reduction on ecosystem productivity, not the emissions due to ignition, is the effect on the annual net ecosystem productivity. And inside the paper is the information of how much carbon was released due to fire. Fast recovery for 2020, but look at 2021, there was not fire there, and it's lower than the fire year in 2019. And 22, drought year, 23, another 5 years. So this extreme drought in 2021 had a stronger effect than the fire effect itself in the net ecosystem productivity. If we look at the monthly, we can see the fire effect here in 2019, and it took, I remember Maria mentioning this, it took 60 days for the ecosystem to come back. Look at these bars here. Come back from, to recover, 60 days. On drought conditions, it took longer, 4 months to recover. And we can see here the drought effect. Not only that the ecosystem became a carbon source by this month, but also the low monthly net ecosystem productivity at the range line. Now, I know Brad is going to be really happy with this. This is the corrected proof of the paper that we put together with 3 years from the range line and 3 years from the pasture side, here class. So we got the data, we say, let's analyze this and see what we come up with. And a few minutes ago, I got an email from Maria that now it's online, it's already published online, so it's available. So, but it's the carbon methane fluxes from 2 sites that are at the end of this range in this, we call it southeastern US. Now, what we can see here from these 3 years, look at the differences in monthly NEP when we contrast the 2 sides. So high productivity here. I try to do everything in English units. So the two slides that are now that I've met. I'm sorry about that. But, so high productivity during the growing season for the pasture side. Carbon source during what we call here the winter in Florida, so in essence. But during this winter period, the rangeland is in consistent sink, a difference with this. It becomes a carbon source during the very dry seasonal drought, and it is stable during all these times. So it's low productivity, but it's really stable, and it's not as seasonal as it is bacteria grass. The other thing that we need to look at this is the methane emissions. So this methane, we measure it as methane, but we convert it into CO2 equivalent. And you can see these peaks here, and this was Hurricane Ian, and it was sustained. Some wet conditions here, but after Hurricane Ian, the methane emissions from the bacteria grass side are not as high as it was in these periods. Methane emissions for the rangeland, we can see very low. And some other periods we have, I can zoom into weekly values, and I can see that the system can act as a methane sink. But here is releasing methane and huge methane emission from this side. Now, I'm moving from monthly to daily values because there is a huge deal when we submit this paper and we talk, and I've been called a liar sometimes because the right management can do good for carbon balance. So I put this in daily values. So these gray bars here are the times when the cows were present around the tower. We call it the footprint of the tower. The gray symbols and line is the saltwater content in percentage. And these black symbols and line here is the methane emission, daily methane emissions as measured by the covariance plan. You can see cows in, cows out, in, out, high saltwater content here, again here, but it's, I'm not gonna say a flat line, but it's like a baseline, not that huge increase in there. So when we have an increase in saltwater content and it comes close to saturation, so still well above the field capacity, these that is when methane emissions start increasing, and only when we have saturated conditions, methane emissions reach this peak here, and it is sustained while the soil is saturated. As soon as, look at that, it takes 2 weeks. So it gets saturated first, and it takes 2 weeks for the methane emissions to kick out. And 1 month after saturation is when methane emissions reach the peak. But the sudden decrease in saturation, the methane emissions goes down. Goes up again, but later in November, January, any increase, even if the cows are in a high soil moisture, there is not increase in methane emissions. And the rangeland at the lower range, you can see the scale all the way, it will not be, we cannot capture that. Methane, even sometimes it is a methane sink. And the same response 2 weeks after, and a huge, a rapid decrease in saltwater content, in saturation content, saturation conditions, and so it goes down. And even with the cows are in high soil moisture, it has not a huge effect. So when we put that in the annual content, so there was not a huge saturation and not a huge drought. Well, it was a drought in 2021, but it was not as severe as it extended later. High NEP for the range, for the Bahia grass south, rangeland, like a quarter of that. But in 2022, when the drought moved on, but Hurricane Ian came, there was a huge emission of methane, but a low productivity because the drought was extended all the way to August, something like that. And Ian came in September 28th, if I remember correctly. Um, and there was a huge methane emission, not that much from the rangeland. Next year, there was a recovery, not that much emission in methane. But when we put that in the annual context, we can see if we integrate methane and CO2, we can see that the rangeland and Bahia grass, they act similarly. So they have the same value in terms of carbon methane balance. And the following year, of course, there was a recovery for that. From these 3 years, I'm not saying that we should replace all the native areas with pasture, but from these 3 years, this is what we got. Here, grass, pasture, have 3 times the annual carbon uptake of the native rangeland. Both systems, different values, but both systems are carbon sinks on the climate extremes, drought, and hurricane. And methane emissions 15 times greater in the pasture, but that greater emission of methane is offset by stronger carbon uptake. And again, I'm not saying that we should replace the native rangeland with improved pasture. We need both because both provide essential ecosystem services, including carbon sequestration, and we should maintain both in the ecosystem because these rangeland lower productivity, but it has a greater stability in addition to many other services. This is in terms of carbon. And the improved pasture has a greater productivity. Now, I mentioned that we have the silvopasture side. And you may be asking, what's going on with the silvopasture, which is in the middle of that grading. So we can look at this, can walk you through this. The rangeland doing the same as we know. The Bahia grass side, high productivity, being a carbon source in this time. We don't have the data, we have the data. We haven't processed it yet because we changed the collecting system and the format is different. It's easier to process in the newer format. So that's why we process that. The same thing here, only 5 months of the silvopasture, but you can see NEP in the middle compared against the Bahia grass. Of course, this is a site where the trees are not making a huge contribution, not a significant contribution yet to this net ecosystem productivity. We are following that. We have already the allometric equation. We developed, we did the first collection in January this year, so we're going to do the second collection trees biomass in January, and we will see the increase in contribution of the tree component to this. We're also including roots into that. So when we look at the methane, different scale, but the same trend. So the Bahia grass is doing, that is what I was calling before the baseline. Silvopasture is in the middle in terms of methane emissions, and rangeland, it's also releasing a very low amount of that methane. When we put it together, as we did for the 2 sites together, so you can see the numbers in there. So Bahia grass has in those 5 months from March to July, stay tuned, we will have probably almost 3 years of information next year. Bahia grass, high productivity, high methane emissions, but is deciding with highest, with the best carbon balance in terms of what we are doing. We are at this time looking for resources to implement this study in other sites, even that we have information from large board, but we want to extend this and we're working hard. We've been submitting proposals to get new resources to instrument other sites within that range and have a more extended understanding of those systems, including changes in soil organic carbon, total ecosystem carbon, evapotranspiration, water use efficiency, soil health, and all of those that happen. Almost at the end, I know I'm teaching you guys and the food, and that's man is driving us crazy. But I wanna say thank you for many people because to do this, there is an army behind that. And draw your scientists, not there from the Vietnam. The second picture from the left, we were putting together the Bahia grass site, and at the end of the day, we said, let's take a picture for the future, and that isn't there. Now this here is big site completely developed. We have visitors from light poles from time to time. This site has been used as a test site for new equipment, for new developments. So for, I think it was this one now that what's going down there now, the third time that we test sensors for a light core and for a Metasflux. And they come here, these two guys here are visitors. And this site here was the day when we finished putting together the silver pasture site. Of course, UF, IFAS, ELTA, the Cattle REC Association. And I wanna, Randy, I wanna look at you and say thank you because you guys been so helpful implementing and setting up these sites, setting up those tower structure needs, skills, and Namrata, Mike, and all people who are connected. Thank you for all the support. So it's not only setting up the sites, it requires some intense maintenance and checkup, and that's what Mike is doing pretty much. And I connect remotely every day, and I check the sites, and whenever there is a problem, that say, ask you $100 to come down with the things and can be fixed remotely. And with that, I will stop here and let you guys ask questions if you guys got a thought. I know this graph is controversial. I know, I knew. Yeah. Again, so this gray points and dots and lines are the soil water content. Soil water content, soil moisture. And these black ones are daily methane emissions. I have to say that we measure fluxes with the precision of 30 minutes resolution. And that is the result of 10 Hz sampling. So we sample CO2 and everything there 10 times per second. But these are the integrated daily values. And these gray bars are the cow's presence in the area. We call it the footprint. Well, I knew that question was coming up too. So you call it a better true measure. So let me tell you, there is not more accurate approach to measure ecosystem exchange of any entity, carbon, evapotranspiration, and now I have all my up there. Evapotranspiration. There is not a more accurate approach than ecovariance. Ecovariance measure whatever is happening in the footprint, and that footprint means what is happening from the center of the tower, and we call that upward. And in our system, we measure whatever is happening in about 160 meters. Sorry, when you compare that to me in feet. 160 meters from the center of the tower downwind or upwind. And the wind direction change during the day, during the 24 hours, during the week, and any spot that is around is spot source. It's been measured there, it's been captured. If we add up, we estimate that how much methane, considering many things, how much methane each cow is releasing in there. So we have this graph where cows were in and out. And the conclusion from this, and I didn't say that before, is that the highest contribution to whatever we're measuring there is from the soil due to the changes in soil, and I'm answering possible questions that may come up with from that, and I leave that for anyone to ask that question. But the highest contribution comes from the soil. And we have chamber measurements. Of course, we don't have hundreds of chambers out there because it's not feasible. But contribution from the soils, we consider chambers is around 80% or higher than the methane emissions that we are measuring as total. But we know the chambers tend to underestimate any emissions that happen at ecosystem level. Yes, there are ways, many papers published, and they put a lot of cows in a paddle and close that and put a ecovariance system and mention that, but the uncertainty on that is quite high. So it's still difficult. But again, we cannot, many people do that, but me as a reviewer, I do not take that you have the ecovariance measurement and you, on top of that, add the methane emission from the cows as if you were measuring that from a feeder. And so in the feeder, yes, you can do that, and you can look at many things, and that is really useful. But you cannot add that on top of the ecosystem. That's double count. So the question is, why do we see those high changes in methane emission during the hurricane season? Well, it's explained in this graph. So when this happened here, we know that the cows, they induce the change in soil microbial community. There is a shift towards microbial that generate methane, right? And those act under anaerobic conditions, right? So whenever the soils are saturated, and those microbes stay in the top soil, first 30 centimeters is where they live at. So, but for them to proliferate, they need that anaerobic condition, right? And even when that flooding is rich, that microbial population is not to the top. So it takes a time to get there. And also we can go into the details, which I don't want to go there now, but the electron acceptors for whatever is happening, they are not depleted, 100% depleted. So, and those are accepting the electron as the process goes, and when those are depleted, methane is released. And we see that huge peak here. But when soil saturation decreases, so there is an oxygenation again, and those chemicals, those elements in the ground, in the soil, goes back pretty quickly. So, but it's because methanogens, they are strictly anaerobic, and they go into that condition.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for today's Ona Highlight. I would like to invite you to join us again on December the 9th at 11 o'clock. Dr. Hans Ellington will be presenting coyote ecology in Florida. And as always, whenever I send you the recording of today's event, I will include the link to register for this next Ona Highlight, as well as the upcoming events that I'm about to share. I'll share those flyers with you. This is an online event that is produced annually, organized by one of our UF alumni, Dr. Juliana Ranches. And it's a really great program. She is a long way away in Burns, Oregon, but her speakers are all across the United States. And as you see here on this slide, some of the topics may be of interest. And we hope that you are, if you are interested, that you will take the time to check this out. So the times tonight is the first night, and I believe instead of 4:30 for them, I think it's going to be 7:30 p.m. for us. And if you would like to register for this free event, just use the QR code there on the screen. Here is another event for ladies, cattle management for women, that's put on annually by the South Florida Beef Forage Program. This particular event is going to be held December 11th from 9 a.m. to 1:30, and it's going to happen at a location that is between Loretta and Okeechobee. And the QR code at the top, if you scan it, it will show you on the map how to get there. And down at the bottom is the QR code to register. The $35 fee includes your lunch and BQA certification. Lots of great topics and something you might want to check out, or you might want to share with somebody else. Here's one to put on your calendar if you don't already have it: the 43rd Annual Florida Cattlemen's Institute and Allied Trade Show. This event is going to be held in Wauchula again this year. And their theme is understanding the why behind today's decisions for tomorrow's success. Registration is $10 if you register by January 9th. Watch for that flyer. So if you're not already doing so, we invite you to follow us on social media so you can stay in touch with everything that we have going on and all of our upcoming programs. And if you do not receive our Friday e-news, just send us an email to this email address you see on the screen, and I'll get you signed up. And we all here wish for you all to have a very happy Thanksgiving. And we hope that if you're able, that we can see you again for another Ona Highlight. Have a good day. Bye-bye.